Hi, hello everyone. Thank you for attending our talk about the attacks against national infrastructure in Iran in the last year. My name is Israel. I'm working at Checkpoint, and I will be giving this talk along with my colleague Sam. He also works at Checkpoint, and we are both part of the Checkpoint research. In the last year, many cyber attacks were performed against Iranian entities, and many dissident groups took responsibility for the different attacks. And we researched some of those attacks, and today we're going to talk about some of them. The first attack happened last July, while what seemed as another regular day in Iran turned upside down. The screens in the national railway stations started to indicate delays and cancellations, and behind the scenes, what happened is that the systems that are responsible for locating where are the trains totally collapsed. On the screens in the national railway station, a message was displayed saying long delays due to cyber attacks, more information 64411. And a quick search showed us that the attackers had some sense of humor, as this number belongs to no other but to the supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei. The next day, another attack has happened, now against the Ministry of Roads and Urban Developments. An Iranian social media profile posted a picture of one of the victims, showing a message of the attackers taking responsibility for both this attack and the attack the day before. Oven, okay. So we started to check if there are any leads for the attack, and fortunately for us, Patfish, this is an Iranian antivirus, posted a report and shedding some light about what happened in the attacks. And Patfish probably had some access to the malware files, as they are the main endpoint solution for Iranian entities. And even though there were no IOCs in the report, there were other information that we could have used, like file names, code snippets, the execution flow. And we used this data in order to find files, and we found dozens of files, all uploaded to VirusTotal from Iran. And even though we couldn't find all the files from the report, we managed to recover most of the execution flow. And the execution flow was assembled from a lot of script files and PE tools that performed several actions, such as disconnecting the computer from the network and disabling antiviruses. And in general, it had too many script files, in my opinion, and it was a little bit weird execution flow. Also, another interesting thing is that we found path and internal object names related to Iranian railways in the scripts, what showed us that the attackers had some of prior knowledge of the environment of the victims, and it also assured us that we are looking at the right files. The attack ends with unleashing the payload that is internally named Meteor, and it's responsible for locking the systems and wiping the victim's computer. And Meteor works only if it has some configuration file in order to operate correctly, and the fields in the configuration file are pretty much straightforward, like path to wipe or processes to kill. And Meteor supports more than 20 configuration fields, but it only uses 10 of them. What might suggest that maybe this tool was not created specifically for this attack. Also, it gave the attackers some kind of flexibility in the execution of the payload and the opportunity to tailor every attack for every victim. And in fact, the configuration that we found and the configuration from the Patfish report was a little bit different in one of the fields, what showed us that the attackers really used different configuration for different victims. And the wiper starts with writing Meteor as started to a log file, and this is where the name of the malware came from. And in general, we want to thank Meteor writers for adding a lot of debug strings in it, what made our life much easier to analyze. And in terms of functionality, Meteor is pretty standard wiper. It corrupts the computer boot configuration, changes passwords, locks the system, and wiping files, but not before it changes the picture, the wallpaper, the desktop wallpaper, and the lock screen image to the following one. And after translating what is written here, we got long delays due to cyber attacks. For more information, 64411. And if it looks familiar to you, this is because this is the exact message that was shown on the platform boards in the actual attack. So after analyzing this attack, we tried to find if this tool was ever used in other attacks as well. And we found in VirusTotal 3 different submitters, we found files submitted from 3 different incidents, 3 different submitters, all of them located in Syria. In those files, we found other versions of the same wiper named internally Comet and Stardust, and by the same debug string that we found in Meteor. And we also found the configuration that Stardust used, and it led us to the victims of those attacks, named Katerji Group and Arfada Petroleum, both of them companies located in Syria. And we also found the image that was replacing the desktop wallpaper. And this image starts with an introduction. I am Indra, God of War. And it also gives an explanation for the attack, saying that this is because a Katerji Group has connections to the Quds Force. So we started to search if there were other attacks on these groups, if there are any information. And what we found is a tweet by an account named, surprisingly, Indra, taking responsibility for those exact attacks. And crawling through Indra's tweets, we found other attacks that they took responsibility for, leaked data from those attacks, and many political messages against Iranian regime and its affiliates, mostly Hezbollah. And Indra took responsibility for several attacks. Most of them matched our data. The first attack was against a company named Alfadex. This is a Syrian company for exchanging money, and it's suspected to have a connection to several terrorist groups. And in this attack, the first version of the wiper was used, named Comet. After that, they took responsibility for attack against a company named Shamwings, but we don't have any technical evidence except the tweets by Indra and the data they leaked. Also, there are the attacks against Arfada Petroleum and Katerji Group that they used the second version of the wiper named Stardust, and they accused them of having ties to the Quds Force. And in November 2020, they threatened to attack Banyas oil refinery, but we don't know if this attack really happened. And since then, Indra stopped tweeting, and we didn't see any operation by them until the attacks against the Iranian railways. And there are several connections between the attacks in Syria and the attacks on the Iranian railway stations and the ministry. First is the execution flow that is assembled from a lot of bash scripts for no clear and there are a lot of bash scripts that made the same functionality. And also the attack announcements in both of the attacks. What is not working? Okay. In both of the attacks, the attackers didn't try to stay silent, but they posted a picture to the victims and taking responsibility. And also, the main connection is the payload. All of the attacks use the same payload, the same wiper, but different versions of it, and we don't have any indication that this tool was ever used by any other group. Also, Comet and Stardust add the name Indra in it. what makes the correlation, the connection between those tools and Indra even stronger. We still need to remember that Indra didn't take responsibility for the attack on Iranian railways. It can be for several reasons, but still we believe that those attacks were performed by the same group for the reason that we stated before. Now I will let Sam to elaborate about another attack against Iranian infrastructure that happened earlier this year.
Okay, let's fast forward half a year when another large attack was carried out against Iranian infrastructure, but this time it was on TV, literally. On January 27th, 2022, a bunch of TV channels owned by the Islamic Republic of Iran Broadcasting, or the IRIB, were hijacked by attackers. And being state-sponsored TV and radio broadcasters in Iran, the IRIB is completely controlled by the government. When the attackers disrupted the broadcast, they played a video showing the leaders of the MEK, a major dissident group in Iran. While showing these images, the video also called for the assassination of the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, whose face you could see here with a red X. While showing these images, the video also, in addition, officials reported other attacks on state-operated radio stations, but never specified which. Now, we began our search on VirusTotal, searching for anything we could possibly find related to the attack. Well, we started finding files right away. Thank you, VirusTotal submitters. And then we kept finding more, and 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 more files. Now, among these files we found included batch scripts to execute payloads, audio and video files, forensics artifacts, .NET executables, and other things as well. We found there were several notable commonalities among these files, including tampered compilation timestamps, similar PDB paths, shared VT submitters, reuse of code, as well as reuse of code and similar coding styles. But even after going through all of these files, we still didn't have an infection chain, since the files that we found were related to later stages of the attack. This might mean that there was an insider threat, which would suggest that maybe there was no phishing or exploit used to start the attack. Now, let's talk about how they replaced the video on the TV. We discovered two important files related to the TV hijacking. The first is the MP4 file. This is the file that was displayed on TV during the attack. We also found a file called simpleplayout.exe, which interrupted the broadcast to play the attacker's video instead. The attackers also wrote a batch script to kill and uninstall software related to the current broadcast to ensure that the video would play, and they replaced the broadcast service with their own executable. We also discovered files related to the radio hijacking. Specifically, we found a WAV file whose audio was very similar to that of the MP4 file we found. We also found a program called avar.exe, which plays the WAV file that we found, and after killing a different process on the system called ava.exe. Now, can you hear me? Okay. So ava.exe, this suggests that ava.exe is probably used to broadcast on the radio, since they killed it and replaced it with their own binary. And interestingly, the name Ava suggests that the attack was probably intended for IRIB's Ava radio station, but this was never publicly confirmed. Now, surprisingly, this wasn't all about just hijacking TV and radio. In fact, when we took a closer look, we saw that there was a destructive operation in play here. Specifically, we found a wiper that was used to destroy files in IRIB's networks. The wiper achieves its goals by destroying computer files, drives, and master boot records. But the wiper is also able to clear event logs, delete backups, kill processes, change user passwords to prevent people from being able to access their accounts. Now, the Wallpaper accepts 3 different forms of configuration, including command line arguments, a hard-coded default configuration, or it can read from a file called messywipe.ini. The Wallpaper also has 3 different modes of operations, including default, which simply overwrites the first 200 bytes of each chunk of 1024 bytes in a file. Next is full purge, which simply overwrites the entire file content. And then lastly, we have light wipe, which overwrites a specified number of chunks via the configuration, which in the hard-coded configuration here is 3. However, we found a batch script that we believe the attackers used to actually execute this payload, which you can see here. They use command line arguments to reset all passwords to random strings and log out any active user sessions. Now, we found 3 different backdoors that shared both code similarities to the Wallpaper as well as very creative naming conventions, including WinScreening, whose primary purpose was to take screenshots, but it also accepts shell commands. Then there's HTTP callback service, which is just a simple RAT that is able to transfer files to and from the CNC server, but it too also does execute shell commands when needed. And lastly, we have HTTP service, which is a multifunctional backdoor with a bunch of features, including, but certainly not limited to, transferring files to and from the CNC server. But wait, didn't HTTP callback service do that too? Okay. Well, it's also able to, guess what? It's able to execute shell commands. It's a little bit redundant, but what can you do? And then HTTP service interacts with the CNC server by sending HTML pages like this one, which gives the attacker a nice user interface by just simply clicking on hyperlinks to send messages or commands back to the backdoor. Now, how exactly did we connect all of these files together? Well, as I mentioned earlier, we started seeing the files come from the same virus total submitters right after the attack, and most of them were located in Iran. When we found the video file on virus total, we immediately recognized it from the news, so we knew we were on the right track. Connecting the video and audio files to the malware was very straightforward, since we saw the file path to the video inside simple playouts configuration file, and we saw that the WAV file was hard-coded into avar.exe. We also found batch scripts that were tampering with software used in broadcasting environments, some of which we specifically know the IRIB is using based on OSINT. And of course, we had many similarities in the executables, including code reuse. Now, here's a picture-perfect example of such code reuse, where we can see on the left, we have a function called doCMD, which simply executes a shell command. This is from HTTP service. And on the right, we have WinScreening, which is another one of the backdoors I mentioned earlier, with the same exact function. doCMD, same code, same everything. Well, I think these guys really like to copy and paste. Now, personally, I could not believe how lucky we were when investigating the files on VT, when we came across multiple Windows event log files. I mean, who uploads that? The event log file displayed here contained evidence that the Wallpaper was executed in the Iranian TV network. As you can see here, the domain mit-tv.ir. And in the event message, you can see here the entry point to the Wallpaper that we found. Now, the Iranian government claimed that the MEK was behind the attack, but they denied any sort of connection. Nonetheless, Iran's claim is logical because they displayed the leaders of the MEK in support of them, but it's possible the attackers are just fans, or maybe they're just trying to mislead us. We don't actually know. Now, immediately after the attack, a hacker group called Predatory Sparrow claimed responsibility on their Telegram channel. The morning of the attack, they wrote a message saying that something good was coming. However, although they took credit for the attack, we don't have any technical proof that it was really them. And another thing to notice is that if you look at the Twitter handle on the video, it points to a different account called Ghyam Sarnegouni. So Ghyam Sarnegouni means uprising to overthrow in Farsi. Since this group first appeared in January 2022, the group has continued to attack the Iranian regime. And in March and April 2022, the group hacked and defaced the websites of the Ministry of Culture and Islamic Guidance and the Ministry of Agriculture Jihad, and defaced their websites with the image seen here, and published leaked documents and destroyed some of their data. The picture also contains the same Twitter handle, Ghyam Sarnegouni, and the images of the MEK leaders, and again, the red X over the Supreme Leader's face. Now, at the beginning of June 2022, the group hacked into over 5,000 surveillance cameras and online services of the Tehran municipality and leaked videos online showing what they had accomplished. And then, during this time, we also saw uploads to VirusTotal of new variants of the Backdoors and the Wallpaper that we found in the IRIB attacks. And in fact, the new variants of the Wallpaper that we found seem to have a new name, and it was called Dilemma, based on the PDB paths we saw. And now for some breaking news. Just earlier this week, on Monday, June 27th, there was a major cyber attack conducted against Iranian steel companies. Now, our friends at Predatory Sparrow took credit for the TV hijacking, posted a video of one of the attacks on their Telegram channel, and claimed that they hit 3 different Iranian steel companies with ties to the IRGC. They also said that the attacks were carried out in such a way to ensure people wouldn't be harmed when destroying infrastructure. So, what do we know so far about these guys? Well, attacks on critical infrastructure require highly skilled attackers because they need to stay under the radar during initial stages and reconnaissance, implying that we're dealing with a very sophisticated group. But on the other hand, the payloads were filled with copy and pasted code and launched by buggy 3-line batch scripts, which demonstrated a lower level of sophistication. This contradiction could have a number of explanations. Maybe they had help on the inside? Maybe this was a collaboration of multiple groups with different skill levels. Maybe we can just ask them on Telegram, because I definitely have a lot of questions for them. Thank you guys very, very much. If you have any questions for us, please feel free to call us at 64411. We'll be happy to answer.